all on this call. Really quick, the topic for today is on career pivots. So during these past 4 months, COVID-19 has forced us to take a collective pause. Without a 1 or 2 hour commute to waylay our day, we've been able to become more introspective. What would life look like if I didn't have a commute? Does my job align with my values? Am I being fully there for my family, my kids, my friends? Do I really want to deal with my asshole boss? Gone are the days of retiring after 40 years at one company, taking home a pension and a gold watch. The relationship between employers and employees has changed dramatically in recent years, and climbing the corporate ladder is no longer the path to success that it once was. So instead, many individuals find themselves pivoting from one career to the next, and then the next. So there's numerous reasons why workers leave their jobs. But one of the most prevalent, only 54% of workers think their employer is loyal to them, which leads to a greater willingness to change jobs. Which leads me to this quote by Jim Rohn. If you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what? Guess what they have planned for you? Not much. So before I ask our first question to our special guest, we're going to do a quick exercise. Promise you, I'm not going to have you pray or anything or do something weird, but if you can just close your eyes, okay? Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Picture a world where money isn't an issue for you, but you had to work. What would your ideal life look like? Picture it clearly. Imagine yourself. What's the first thing you do when you wake up? Do you go for a 5-mile jog? Do you meditate? Do you eat a big breakfast? Do you spend time with your kids? Now finish your morning routine. Do you leisurely head to your home office or do you commute to work? Is your work your own business or do you work at a Fortune 500 company? Close your eyes and picture this. Picture yourself in your ideal role. Picture yourself opening your office, the door to your office. What kind of work are you doing? Do you feel fulfilled? How are your coworkers? What's the culture like? Who's your boss? How do they treat you? Are you doing work that you love? How do you feel at your perfect job? Okay, so now you're about to head home, or perhaps you're going to have dinner with your friends. Now picture the perfect ending to your day. You can open your eyes now. So a rhetorical question to you all. You can answer this in your head. Are you currently living your ideal life? We tend to make decisions in buckets. What does my ideal career look like? What job do I want? And then we build our plan that's void of the other parts of our lives. However, when we're figuring out our career pivots, we need to also ask these other questions. What type of parent or spouse do I want to be? Does my career allow me to have a healthy and sane lifestyle? Do I like who I work with? Does this job align with my values and what I value? We've been told to strive for work-life balance, but we realize that it's a fallacy. There's no such thing as work-life balance. Everything is interconnected and interwoven like a tapestry. For you to say that you value and that your top priority is your family and your kids, but you rarely see them do a job that takes you away from them for most of the day, there's a huge disconnect. And that example is the example that I had in my past 10 years. Though I loved my job, I was only seeing my daughter for an hour a day. So before you figure out your perfect job, you have to envision what your perfect life looks like. What do you value? Does your career align with your values? There's a concept. I'm going to share my screen really quick. There's a concept in Japanese culture called ikigai, which means a reason for being. It's a thing that balances the spiritual and the practical and makes your life worthwhile. The diagram shows how you find your ikigai. You have to find the cross section of 4 things: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And so this is kind of what we are striving for. To reframe this, this conversation, we also kind of call it purpose. What's your value? What do you value the most in life is the question I ask. Before you can even think about a career pivot, what do you want your life to look like? So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce Stephanie Nadi Olson. I met her at a leadership retreat for executives last year, and I was so amazed at her career pivot and her story. Stephanie founded We Are Rosie in 2018 based on a genuine understanding of what it feels like to not belong. Her life experience as a daughter of a refugee has driven her affinity and advocacy for marginalized groups. We Are Rosie is a manifestation of her soul's calling to create a better way to do business by focusing on the people doing the work. She has created a human-centered approach to marketing that celebrates diversity. Stephanie was awarded Entrepreneur of the Year in 2019 by the Stevie Awards and was just named Ad Age 2020 Visionary Founder of the Year. Congratulations, Stephanie. So if you can just unmute yourself, I'd like you to tell us about your journey. And guys, it might make it a lot easier for you if you go out from gallery mode to speaker view as well. Stephanie, tell us about your journey in finding work that was truly aligned with your purpose.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you all for sharing your time with me today. It's like an honor to be here with all these amazing people. A little bit about my journey, I typically take it back further than people might expect to my childhood. And I think that so much of our journey is shaped by our own childhood experiences, and that's certainly the case for me. So as Lan mentioned, I am the daughter of a Palestinian refugee who came to the States straight out of refugee camps in the 1970s. And my parents actually met in a car accident here in Atlanta. So my family is just this really incredible microcosm of diversity. My mother is this blonde hair, blue-eyed child of German immigrants. And my father is this brown-skinned Muslim man named Ramadan. And, growing up in that household with such different sides of my family and having cousins that had such different life experiences and spoke different languages and practiced different religions, I've always had an appreciation for diversity. And I couldn't really articulate it until I was an adult, but that was always just like the representation of my life and my experiences. So I grew up in that environment, but also as a first generation college attendee and graduate, first generation American, I kind of fell into the trap that I think a lot of people fall into. My family never had money growing up. We did okay, but it was always a very working class environment. My dad worked at the mall my entire childhood as a tailor. And so I realized at a young age, I got these ideas stuck in my head about what work means. And I had kind of subconsciously began to associate, even at a young age, work with just exhaustion and like kind of this thing that you have to get through in order to have a life. Which I think a lot of first-gen immigrants can relate to, certainly, but just a lot of people in general. So I have this amazing opportunity being born in this country, and I went to college. I went to Georgia Tech here in Atlanta and worked my way through college. So was really committed to not graduating with debt. I had to pay my own way, and I had like 6 jobs in college, right? And this was like part of my story that I didn't think about at the time, but I was tutoring the football players at Georgia Tech. I was writing papers for basketball players. I was a waitress. I worked at a refrigeration company. I just always was spinning plates, right? It was just like my comfort mode. And when I left college, I got a job at Microsoft. And if any of you have immigrant parents, you can imagine how thrilled my father was. I mean, he was like, oh, this is it. Like, you're going to work at Microsoft for the next 60 years. It's going to be like the greatest thing. I'm going to write home about it. I'm going to tell everybody, like, we know what Microsoft is. This is good. And I was pretty stoked too. I get paid well. I was 21. And I was like, this is cool. And I got kind of an unsettled feeling about a year in, and I wanted something more, and I couldn't, it wasn't tangible. I like hadn't figured out what was unsettling me. And I left, and I was working in the media division of Microsoft. So then I went and worked in more media at AOL, and kind of climbed the ladder there. And I think, as a lot of us do, I just kept climbing. Like, I was like, where's the fulfillment? Like, this is cool. Like, I can do this. I'm good at it. Like, I'm uniquely suited for, I like the people I work with, but like the work wasn't really speaking to my heart. And as I got older, I recognized that I was doing things outside of work to try and create fulfillment, right? Like the things that really gave me purpose and lit me up. So I started the Atlanta Refugee Supper Club, connecting recently resettled refugees with American host families to help them get on their feet. I got really involved with the Atlanta Birth Center, which was, kind of my way of supporting other women that had postpartum depression, which is something that I went through after the birth of my first daughter. And those were the things that really lit me up. So I leave major corporations. I got all this stuff going on the side that like fills my bucket, and I go to work and just kind of slog it out. And I went and worked at a startup because I was like, I just try this. Like, let's try something totally different. And I was like, this is my vibe. Like, these are my people. This is the pace that I have come to love. And I was always like creating more work for myself in the past because I need that pace. And unfortunately, I also encountered like some pretty rough working circumstances. I was the only woman on a leadership team. I was the only mother out of 200 employees. So there was certainly some challenges. And I got to a point where I gave birth to my second daughter, and I finally picked up my head. It was like one of those moments where you're just like on a treadmill. And we all have these moments, and I think it can appear in a million ways. It can appear as a job loss. It can appear as, the loss of a loved one or whatever it may be. And for me, it was just, I don't know how to explain it other than that I couldn't take one more step in this job that I was in. Like, it was absolutely unfulfilling for me. I didn't respect the people that I was working for, which was a first for me. And I had these 2 babies at home, and I quit my job, which is the batshit craziest thing I've ever done in my life, right? Like, my family definitely counts on my income, like 2 babies at home. It was crazy. And I just walked out. And I took stock of my life. Like, a lot of what Lan is saying, like, is this it? Like, is this the sacrifice that my parents made for me to have all this opportunity? And I'm just going to resign myself to doing work that is unfulfilling and painful at times and gives me ulcers and all of these things? Or am I going to like really swing for the fences and try to have the life that I want? And with the support of my absolutely incredible husband, I really took stock of like, what lights me up as a human being. And I love this idea. Like, I feel like when you're around something that lights you up, if you have a physical reaction, you're like, oh, like that gave me goosebumps, or like, oh, like that like gives me butterflies. I love talking about it. It gives me energy. And so I went back and took stock of my life of like, where were the moments in my career and in my life where I had that, right? Where I was like, I want to do this. I want to jump out of bed to do this. And frankly, it was the work that I had been doing with the Refugee Supper Club, right? And supporting people who were marginalized and underestimated and overlooked, because it's so incredibly personal to me. So then I did a match of like, okay, now I know what lights me up. How do I make that happen with the skills that I've gained in marketing? Because like, I got to make money. I cannot be running a nonprofit. So, I spent 3 months really like digging deep and getting to know myself in a way that I hadn't ever taken the time to do previously. And I recognized that one of the trends that I was seeing in the marketing space after 15 years was that there were a ton of people who, like me, had had unfortunate experiences, whether it's age discrimination, racism, ageism. I mean, there's any number of things that can make people feel unwelcome in a traditional work environment, in the marketing industry, and then kind of just can make people feel unwelcome by this very rigid 9 to 5 in office ideal that we have as a culture. And I was seeing a lot of people opt out of the marketing industry, and I called them my corporate refugees. And I was like, this sucks. Like, one, they shouldn't have to leave. They shouldn't have to go start an entrepreneurial journey just to get dignity and respect or to work in a way that makes sense for their lives. So I'm going to go create opportunity for them the same way that I did with Syrian refugees that were recently resettled in Atlanta. And I started to gather them all up. At first, it was just me. I actually convinced my nanny, who somehow got roped into this soul purpose journey with me. And over the last 2.5 years, we have grown to a community of 5,000 people doing work that really lights me up every day. So we have 5,000 marketers ranging from the former CEOs of massive ad agencies, former CMOs of Fortune 500 brands, to self-taught creatives that never went to college and have 3 or 4 years of experience and just absolutely kind of brilliant minds. And we get to connect them with opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have. So I am essentially devoting my life, and have devoted the last 3 years of my life, to building a new way to work where everybody can feel welcome and honored and treated with dignity, that has inclusion built in to our DNA from the ground up. With this kind of intense focus on caring for the people doing the work so that they can have both the life that they want and deserve and the career that they desire. And this is something that we have lost along the way. We've told everybody, and we've behaved in a way where there has to be a trade-off. And I don't believe that it has to be that way. And I don't know that I can change work for the whole world over, but I can certainly move the needle forward enough so that my daughters and the next generation and this generation has better opportunities to work in a way that frankly just makes sense for us as whole human beings. And that's a little bit about my journey. I don't know where we are in terms of timeline, but that's kind of how I landed here in a nutshell. There's all sorts of twists and turns in there, but.
Love that. And, one of the quotes I think of is from The Alchemist, with your kind of story right now. It's to realize one's personal legend is a person's only real obligation. And that kind of really finding your purpose and your meaning. And I, during that executive retreat that we were on, you were telling this story about, you weren't really sure where you were going, but you kind of built this business in your head, and you had lunch with a friend.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing that story? Because I think it's brilliant. Because it's one of those things where when you put that energy out, and when you feel stuck, and when you're so aligned with your values, things start coming to you. That's sort of amazing, mind-blowing to me. If you can kind of share it, I think that would be great.
This is such a wild story. So a lot of people are like, how do you start a business? And the truth is, like, I had no idea. I mean, I was Googling it, like the most basic things. Like our first contract, I like found on the internet. It was an Accenture but I just like find and replaced Accenture with We Are Rosie. Like, we've come a long way in the last 2.5 years, but one of the first things I did was just speak it into existence and just really own what my heart wanted. And so people were very curious because I kind of walked out of my career at the top, at the peak. And I think a lot of people are like, damn, I wish I could do that. Right. There was a lot of, conversations that happened. And this woman that I had gotten to know in my last job, she had interviewed for a position on my team, reached out and was like, do you want to like grab coffee? And I was like, sure, I'm not doing anything. I'm just like journaling and trying to figure out why I'm on this, what I'm here on Earth School to learn to do, or to what change I'm here to impact. And we went out to lunch, and she was like, so what are you doing? And I was like, here it is. I'm gathering up all of the independent talent in marketing, and I'm connecting them to opportunity. And we're going to be able to handle project-based work across the board in this really agile, transparent, effective way. And we're going to have the most diverse teams on the planet. She was like, this is really cool. And I was like, thanks. And the next day, she was on LinkedIn, and one of her clients posted, I need 10 freelancers. It was like a Thursday. I need 10 freelancers to start by Monday. Send everybody my way. And this woman was like, you should talk to my friend Stephanie. And we didn't have a website. I didn't have an LLC. We didn't have a bank account. I mean, I had literally just made it up, right? And I got on the phone with this woman, the client, and she was like, yeah, we need 10 freelancers by Monday. And I was like, totally. Like, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we got it. And I found an Accenture contract and sent it over to her. And I just like hustled. Like I worked, for 72 hours straight to put this team together. And it is one of the biggest projects we've done to date. She is still a client of ours, and all 10 of those Rosies still work for We Are Rosie. And if they don't still work for us, they've become our clients as they've taken full-time jobs. So it was like the gift from the universe to get this thing off the ground and running. And we didn't even have a website when we started that project. So it was completely wild.
I love that story. It just inspires me every time you tell it. But so excited. I mean, where can the group find you? What's your website, if you can let the group know?
We're at wearerosie.com, ROSIE, and we're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And kind of when you're talking about the community kind of supporting you, it's just like a random friend that you have coffee with. This was our kind of whole purpose with like Let's Talk and our community of 7 is people helping each other, right? Because none of us have done this alone, none of us. And the ability for this group to kind of be able to kind of connect with each other, help each other, many people are losing their jobs left and right. And so the purpose of this community is kind of to help the next, person sitting next to you or next grid, wherever we're at. So the next person I want to kind of have share a story is our good friend, Mita. Are you still there, Mita? Awesome, because Mita has an amazing story. I'll let her kind of talk about it, but Mita is currently the head of diversity and probably one of my dearest friends, head of diversity and cross-cultural marketing at Unilever. So Mita's had a storied career working for top Fortune 500 companies like J&J, Avon, Pfizer. Mita, you started your career in marketing and made the big leap into diversity and inclusion. Tell us about your journey and how you made the move, because marketing and D&I aren't like normally the traditional, transition.
Yeah. Well, since we're in the community of 7, I'll tell you the truth, which is I did not want this job. I had a long career in marketing, and I had my then CEO 4.5 years ago asked me to take this role. I had like a number of people in the company ask me to take this role, and I was like, I'm a marketer. Like, why would I do this role? I had like my own biases. I'm gonna go lead Baby Dove or Lipton or something else. And it was my young brother who said to me, well, like, they've asked you 3 times, so I don't think you have a choice anymore. But also he reminded me of a few things, which is in my entire career, I had like led as an inclusive leader, but also as an inclusive marketer. Like when I was at J&J, I was fighting for Black talent for the first time in like a multimedia campaign. When I was at Avon creating color cosmetics, I was like, this blush doesn't work on my skin tone. Like, who am I creating these products for? And then leading Vaseline and signing Viola Davis and helping turn that business around was like just a career highlight. So I just thought about all those things that really mattered to me. And I think on a personal note, when Lan talks about purpose, I know that that can sound like really heavy. And as Stephanie was sharing her story, you're like, I don't know, my purpose is just to keep my kids alive in this pandemic. Like, what's my purpose? Like, I don't know anymore. But I would say one of the things that has really driven me personally is that I'm the child of immigrant parents. My younger brother and I were both raised here. My parents are from India, and my dad's mother was married when she was 12 years old. My mother's mother was married when she was 10 years old. They were both married to men in their 20s. They had very large families and were remarkable women. And I share that story pretty openly now because I think that it is, to me, I'm living proof of what gender equality can look like in just less than 3 generations, right? So I think, we all have stories, and sometimes we're not ready to share them. Or sometimes it's stories of us being allies of other people. But that is what really has driven me to do this work. And I think actually doing this work unlocked my purpose. Because it wasn't a role that I chose, but the role chose me. So that's my story. I will also say, we all have biases of what we think jobs are going to be. And sometimes people see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. And I think also in this environment, as Lan and I have been talking, like, so much disruption and change. Just be open to things that you wouldn't think you would actually necessarily take on is my biggest piece of advice, because I think you might be surprised at how rewarding that experience will be.
Yeah, and I know Allie's not, she had to attend the closing for her home. But one of the things we always talk about was a stat, and I've shared in previous calls, is that men will apply for a job with 60% of the qualifications for a job, where women wait for for 100%. Like, they won't even apply for a job because they don't feel like they're qualified. And I think one of the things that we need to do just as people, not just women too, a lot of men have these doubts as well, the imposter syndrome. just do it. If you're smart, if you're intelligent, you'll figure it out, right? And I think just, bet on yourself, right? It's kind of funny. Someone had posted on LinkedIn, and they were just talking about Kanye running for president. And it was just basically saying, hey, if Kanye is going to run for president, you can apply for that job. It's, so just bet on yourself, right? So for our next activity, I'm going to break you out into groups of 5 or 6. I want you to introduce yourself, name, company, previous role, or what you're looking for. Please note, we're going to keep these conversations private. So what is said in the room stays in the room. We aren't going to record anything during the breakout rooms. If you, so another thing you can kind of pose during these groups is, if you had nothing to lose and money wasn't a constraint, what's your ikigai? Articulate to the group what your perfect job or lifestyle would look like. And it could be posed as what I want. Like, I want work-life balance. I want to be able to spend time with my daughter. I want to get paid what I deserve. I want to be respected by my boss. Or you could also pose what you don't want. I don't want an asshole boss. I've had them and I don't want any more. So I'm going to break you out into groups, and I will see you guys on the other. Everyone, I hope you guys had good conversations with your group. I'm going to point out, is Sarah Axel on the phone? I'm trying to see. Is Sarah, you there?
Yeah.
So I know we've kind of had this talk before too. It's similar to kind of Mita. You kind of transitioned from being on the agency and sales side, and you really wanted to, whereas Mita kind of just fell into it in some ways. It found her. You actively wanted to transition to D&I. Tell us a little bit about that and kind of your journey.
Yeah, I was kind of a lifelong D&I volunteer. I always put my hand up to lead the communities. I co-chaired groups. I got involved in the culture clubs and the fun committees and all the things at work. And I did a lot of volunteer work with nonprofits, but I never thought about it as a career until I was given just kind of the amazing opportunity of time when I took a severance package, and I really kind of looked at what I wanted to do next. And I think the Ikigai is such a great guide for that, because I had, I was good at advertising on the front lines. I was being paid well for it. The golden handcuffs were tough. I did enjoy advertising, but I didn't feel like I was adding to the world. So when I had the gift of time, I just kind of sat back and thought, what do I want to do next, as opposed to what is the next thing I'm supposed to do on this ladder that's in front of me? And D&I came up. So I really just kind of pursued it 100% right after having a baby, and switched careers entirely this past March, and really excited to just be doing the work full time right now, because it's very fulfilling.
So did you have to kind of, one of the barriers that a lot of people transitioning or doing a pivot has is the kind of education and training that you need to kind of get into a role. Did you do any of that? Did you get a degree? Did you take a course?
I got a certification from Cornell. So I kind of took the halfway point. I knew I needed something in my resume that was official, beyond all of the hours I had put in. And that seemed a really good way to do that. And then I also joined basically every single group and spoke to every single person that would listen for 2 minutes and told them what I wanted, and just kind of kept putting it out there and putting it out there.
Yeah.
And actually wound up in this job because of a Facebook group.
Wow. So one of those kind of coincidences that just kind of change your life.
Yeah.
So we're going to do one more breakout group. This is going to be a smaller group of 3 or 4. So in the last breakout group, you kind of explored what what your ideal life would kind of look like, or what your ideal job would look like. So the next breakout group, you're going to talk about, how do you get there? What skill sets do you need? What do you need to, do you need to kind of have a savings in place? Do you have to look for investors? What are the steps you need to take to make